The story begins with a terrifying plane crash. Our main character, Chuck, is quietly sitting in the airplane restroom when suddenly the cabin pressure drops. The bathroom door suddenly bursts open, and at the same time, a violent explosion occurs in the cargo area. The crew quickly realizes the plane is in serious danger. The pilot rushes Chuck back to his seat and tells him they will have to make an emergency landing in the ocean. He gives Chuck a life raft and tells him to fasten his seatbelt immediately. But things only get worse. The plane begins descending rapidly. At this point, they are only about 3,000 meters above the sea. That's when Chuck notices something important. The pocket watch from his girlfriend has fallen onto the floor. While the pilot tells him to put on his life jacket, Chuck unbuckles his seatbelt and struggles to grab the watch. But the moment he reaches for it, the plane suddenly tilts sharply. Now he can barely move. The pilot notices Chuck isn't secured in his seat and unbuckles his own belt to help him. But the violent turbulence badly injures the pilot. Despite everything, the pilot manages to guide the aircraft towards the ocean, but the landing goes terribly wrong. As soon as the plane hits the water, the cabin begins filling with seawater. Because Chuck's seatbelt was not fastened, he survives the impact. Suddenly, the upper part of the aircraft bursts open and water rushes inside. Fortunately, Chuck still has the inflatable life raft in his hands. But when he tries to deploy it, part of the raft becomes trapped inside the wreckage. The sinking plane begins dragging Chuck down into the ocean with it. For a moment, it seems certain he will be pulled under with the aircraft. Then suddenly, the rope attached to the raft snaps. The raft pulls Chuck away from the wreckage, saving him from certain death. After struggling through the waves, Chuck finally manages to climb onto the raft. Completely exhausted, he holds onto the edge as the violent ocean tosses him around. But the danger is not over yet. The raft slowly drifts toward the aircraft's engine, which is still running. Realizing the danger behind him, Chuck closes his eyes. Seconds later, the engine explodes. The blast creates a powerful shock wave that throws Chuck far away into the ocean. The burning wreckage of the plane slowly sinks beneath the sea. But Chuck's fight for survival has only just begun. A violent storm begins to rage across the ocean. Massive waves crash against the small raft again and again. All Chuck can do is cling to the rope and hope he survives. After what feels like an endless struggle, the raft suddenly begins losing air. Sharp rocks tear through the material, but that means one thing: Chuck has reached land. Using the last of his strength, he drags the raft onto the shore. The next morning, the warm sunlight touches his face. Chuck slowly wakes up and realizes something incredible. He survived. But as he looks around, he quickly understands something terrifying. He has washed up on a small, unknown island. Even though he escaped death, his troubles are far from over. Chuck begins gathering scattered cargo from the plane and searching the island for other survivors. But everywhere he looks, there is only silence. It becomes painfully clear that he is completely alone.
Anybody!
The island doesn't even appear to exist on any map. Realizing that rescue may not come anytime soon, Chuck begins thinking of ways to save himself. His first idea is simple. He writes a huge help sign on the beach, hoping a passing ship will see it. Soon, night falls. Chuck waits on the shore, staring out into the dark ocean, hoping someone will notice him. But as the night grows deeper, his hope slowly turns into fear. The jungle around him is filled with strange sounds from unknown creatures. The next day, Chuck builds a small shelter using debris from the crash. While sorting through the things that washed ashore, he realizes he only has one personal belonging left: the pocket watch from his girlfriend. Looking at it reminds him of their time together. Before leaving on his business trip to Kuala Lumpur, she gave him the watch as a symbol of their love. They were planning to get married on Christmas, but the plane crash destroyed those plans. Back home, everyone believes Chuck died in the accident, yet somehow he is still alive. But survival on the island quickly becomes extremely difficult. Food and water are nearly impossible to find. Chuck discovers coconuts, but without tools opening them is incredibly hard. After many attempts, he finally smashes one open with a rock. The coconut water tastes like pure nectar, but coconuts alone won't be enough. Chuck decides to explore the island further. He tries climbing the highest point on the island, hoping to see ships or signs of civilization, but the sharp rocks make the climb extremely painful. So he cuts his pants with a stone and and stuffs them with leaves, creating makeshift shoes. When he finally reaches the top, the sight completely destroys his hope. All around him is nothing but endless ocean. No ships, no people, no signs of rescue. Just when he is feeling completely hopeless, he notices something strange nearby. He runs toward it, hoping it might be another survivor. But instead, he finds the body of the pilot. The pilot had died long ago. With sadness in his heart, Chuck drags the body onto the island and collects a few useful items. He takes a pair of shoes, a flashlight that still works, and the pilot's wallet. Then he digs a grave and buries the pilot respectfully. He writes the date of death on a nearby rock. That evening, Chuck sits quietly on the beach looking at the shoes. A strange sadness fills his heart. He realizes that one day he might be the one buried on this island. That thought keeps him awake all night. Chuck understands that if he does nothing, death is certain. So the next day he begins learning how to survive. He collects moss from leaves and stores water inside coconut shells. He carves a wooden spear to try catching fish. Even though many attempts fail, he refuses to give up. One night, while sitting alone, he suddenly notices a distant light. Chuck immediately begins shouting and flashing his torch, hoping to attract attention. He believes a ship might finally rescue him, but the light slowly fades away into the distance. The ship never sees him. Overcome with anger and frustration, Chuck decides the next morning to chase the ship using a raft. He believes this may be his only chance. Despite countless attempts, the waves constantly push him back toward the island. Each time he tries, the ocean defeats him. Finally, during one attempt, his leg slams violently into a sharp rock underwater. The injury leaves him in unbearable pain. Unable to continue, Chuck drags himself back to shore in terrible condition. That evening, a powerful storm hits the island. Heavy rain and strong winds make the situation even worse for the injured Chuck. He struggles to protect the company packages that washed ashore. Looking for shelter, he finds a small cave. To stay conscious, he drinks dirty rainwater. Completely exhausted, his injured body finally collapses. As the flashlight battery dies, Chuck is swallowed by darkness. The next morning, he wakes up in severe pain. His leg injury looks terrible. Without treatment, it could become life-threatening. Realizing he must survive, Chuck finally decides to open the company packages he had been protecting all this time. Inside, he finds several items: videotapes, a beautifully wrapped volleyball, a long dress, and a pair of ice skates. However, he chooses not to open the last package. Maybe he wants to keep at least one mystery alive. Using foam from the packages, he treats his wound. The blades from the ice skates become incredibly useful tools. He even uses the dress fabric to create a fishing net. After many days of hunger, Chuck finally manages to catch fish and eat properly. Next, he tries to create fire by rubbing pieces of wood together. He tries again and again, from morning until night, but nothing works. Eventually, his hands begin bleeding. Frustrated and exhausted, Chuck screams in anger. In that moment, he throws the volleyball away. When it lands nearby, Chuck notices something strange. The red handprint from his bloody palm remains on the ball. Suddenly, he has an idea. He draws eyes and a face onto the volleyball. Now it looks like a person. Because of his extreme loneliness, Chuck decides to treat the ball like a companion. He names it Wilson. From that moment on, Wilson becomes his only friend on the island. With renewed determination, Chuck finally succeeds in creating fire. Seeing the flames feels like winning a great victory. Fire allows him to cook food and send smoke signals. At night, he talks to Wilson about his situation. According to his calculations, he is now more than 4,000 miles away from civilization. The chances of rescue are almost zero. Still, Chuck refuses to give up. Over time, his teeth become badly infected from poor hygiene. Eventually, the pain becomes unbearable. Using a skate blade and a rock, Chuck painfully removes the infected tooth himself. Years pass. Nearly 4 years later, Chuck has completely adapted to life on the island, but hope for rescue slowly fades. Then one day he finds a large sheet of metal near the shore. This gives him a new idea. If he uses it as a sail, he might be able to escape the island. Immediately, Chuck begins building a raft. He gathers large logs and ties them together with vines. He even makes rope using videotape film. During this time, Chuck's mental state begins to struggle. One night, he argues with Wilson, shouting in frustration,
Spending the rest of my life talking to a goddamn volleyball!
but soon he regrets it deeply. He searches the island all night until he finds Wilson again. Finally, after weeks of work, the raft is ready. Chuck waits for the right wind. When the wind finally changes direction, he pushes the raft into the ocean. Together with Wilson, he begins his dangerous journey across the sea. The waves nearly destroy the raft again and again, but Chuck refuses to stop. However, during a violent storm, disaster strikes. Wilson becomes untied and drifts away into the ocean. Chuck desperately jumps into the water trying to save him, but the distance is too great. Helplessly, he watches his only friend disappear into the sea, heartbroken and alone again. Chuck loses the will to fight. Believing he will never return home, he prepares himself for death, but just as he gives up hope, he hears a strange sound, a whistle. When Chuck looks up, he sees a massive cargo ship nearby. The crew spots him and rescues him. After years of suffering, Chuck finally returns home. His survival story makes headlines everywhere, but Chuck doesn't care about fame. He only wants to see his girlfriend again. When he finally visits her house, a man opens the door. The man introduces himself as Kelly's husband.
I'm Kelly's husband.
Chuck is shocked. Kelly believed Chuck had died years ago. Eventually, she married and started a family. Realizing the situation, Chuck quietly accepts the truth. Later, during a celebration dinner, Chuck sees seafood dishes on the table. Fish and crabs that once helped him survive on the island are now served as luxury food. The memories overwhelm him. The next day, Chuck delivers the final package he had protected all those years. He thanks the owner for unknowingly helping him survive. Even after everything he endured, Chuck never opened that package. And with that, the story comes to an end.